Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Star Trek Lower Decks Season 1 Episode 9 Crisis Point. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Lower Decks. So I have to start with a spoiler warning for Lower Decks up to Season 1 Episode 9. If you haven't seen up to this point, you will not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. So, not going to beat around the bush here. This is bar none, by far, clear and away my favorite episode of the show so far. I love this episode. I was laughing hysterically throughout the episode. I think this is the funniest episode. It is the best episode in terms of character development, in terms of plot, in terms of structure, in terms of pretty much everything. And to be perfectly honest, I could not find a flaw with this episode. Previous episodes I reviewed, I noticed kind of things that bugged me, flaws that bothered me, things that I thought were kind of contrived or didn't make sense, or structure was kind of not working for me. Not so with this episode at all. I think this is a brilliant satire. I gotta say I love the show now, especially if they put out more episodes like this one. I think I can comfortably say that Lower Decks is my favorite of the three so-called modern Star Trek shows. Discovery, Picard, and this. With a performance like this, I gotta say, I don't know if it's my favorite episode, because Discovery and Picard did have singular good episodes, but then the rest of the show kind of messed things up and they were a bit all over the place. Where Lower Decks, to me, even though I had some issues with the previous episodes, has been consistently good. And this was just, I thought this was one of the best comedy episodes I've ever seen of any comedy show. I'm not talking Star Trek here. I'm talking comedies, animated or otherwise. This was a strong one. Now, I will grant you with the caveat that you kind of do need to be a Star Trek fan to love it as much as I do. I can see someone who is never seen the Star Trek movies, or only seen one or two and isn't that familiar with them, not really loving this episode that much, because this episode was catered to Star Trek fans. I mean, you could argue the whole show is, but I think this episode in particular was. In particular, of course, the movies, because this was the episode that was all about making fun of the movies. And actually, I think I'd love that focus on that. I think maybe if other Lower Deck episodes focused more on specific aspects of Star Trek, maybe they could have an episode that just made fun of Enterprise, or an episode that just made fun of Voyager, an episode that just made fun of Deep Space Nine. Maybe it would be better like this, to have an episode that just makes fun of the movies. I think it really worked, and it was really hyper focused. And plus, even outside of the comedy, which I loved to death, the character stories were good. We learned more about Mariner in this episode than we have in any other episode. And I think they sort of using this backdrop of the movies to sort of explore her psyche and treat it as therapy for her, I think really, really, really worked. Now with Bulmer, we didn't not necessarily learn anything more about him, because he's basically still being the suck up, the kiss ass who wants to advance. That was basically his character trait. But I'm fine with that, because this episode wasn't about him. In fact, his true storyline added to the comedy, it added to the humor. I think it fit really nicely, where there were all this serious movie shit going on, and every once in a while Bulmer would just pop up. What kind of cookies does Captain Freeman like? That was effective comedy. I thought it really worked, and plus they used the ensemble to better effect. As I said, the last couple episodes have been doing a much better job at this. Earlier in the season, they just split it up, and Tendi and Rutherford went and did their own thing, and I was getting sick of that format. I think this is, even though Rutherford and Tendi didn't factor too much into this episode, but they were great as supporting characters, and you got more of that ensemble going on. Particularly, I like what they did with Tendi, because they were playing off of and again, this had less to do with the movies and more maybe to do with Star Trek shows in general, but they're or Star Trek in general. Star Trek always plays off of stereotypes and makes every species like have one overall trait. Like Vulcans are logical, Klingons are warriors, and whatnot, what have you. So I like how Beckett was stereotyping Tendi and how she was very uncomfortable with that. She's like, this is the Orion pirate who, and she's like, oh yeah, I'm a pirate. I like to steal things that aren't mine. Which clearly, as an individual, she had absolutely felt no relation to that whatsoever. And I like how she admitted that later in the episode that sure, Orions are known as pirates and that a reputation was earned, but not every single Orion is like that. And she's like, but that's not me. It's stereotyping her. It's holding up the cliche, and it's actually kind of offensive to her to say that, oh yeah, you're Orion, so you must be a pirate. And she calls him out, and at the end of the episode, Mariner apologizes and says, you're absolutely right that, I shouldn't have tried to pigeonhole you just because you're an Orion. And I love that, and that's something Star Trek doesn't really address that much. Usually, like, Ferengis are all about profit. Vulcans are all about logic. But anyway, I love that. And then Rutherford, like, his thing was okay. I don't think I loved it, but I didn't hate it or dislike it in any way. It was fine. It's because when he said, like, oh, you mean I can say whatever I want to my boss with no consequences whatsoever? Ooh, let me find him. I knew he was going to say something nice and be, like, really polite and like, oh, you're the best engineer ever. I knew that. That was predictable. But that's fine. That's fine that's predictable because it's totally within his character. And I did think it was kind of funny how the two of them sort of, oh, so even though you're just like a henchman for a pirate who destroyed my ship, you're still okay in my book. Like, that was hilarious. And so that really worked for me as well. And and as I said with Mariner, her whole thing about using this as therapy, and they had freaking the therapist who talks about food all the time, and I like that in joke, and they sort of kept it up, and how he wasn't really helpful, but when she went into the holodeck and saw, and I love the whole premise was Bulmer created this program and recreated like everyone on the entire ship accurately to the T, just so he could practice for an interview and suck up to the captain. I think that's funny. I think it works for his character, and it works for Mariner's character, of course, that she would twist it and manipulate it to do something weird, and sort of on a subconscious level she actually used that as therapy to play the villain. And they had the other version of her when they were like sort of attacking each other. She realized that that's who she really is, and she also realized who her mother really is. So I thought it was a great character story. Now let me get into some of the movie references because I loved these to death. Particularly, I gotta tell you, I don't know how most people feel about this, but the scene where they're in the shuttle pod and they were approaching the Cerritos and they were playing that music. By the way, the music, they sort of it was the opening theme to Lower Decks, but they sort of also spliced it with some of Star Trek II theme music, which you can tell, like at times I thought, wow, they're kind of ripping Star Trek II, but then they sort of riff it differently so that it's sort of flows into the Lower Decks theme. I love that, by the way. But so anyway, they're in the shuttle pod and they're flying around in Cerritos. It's like, oh look, like I was laughing my ass off this whole sequence, because it was making fun of the motion picture flat out the motion picture where Scotty and Kirk are in the shuttle and they go around the Enterprise for like 10 minutes straight. You know, thankfully this sequence didn't last that long, but they did drag it out and make it ridiculous, and how like, oh, everyone's tearing up and just to see the ship, and how they had all these angles and whatnot, and towards the end of the sequence they just had it spinning around. Like, I thought that was the funniest thing ever. And part of the reason, mind you, is that I hated that sequence from the motion picture. I thought it was ridiculous. I thought it was dumb. It's part of the reason why I don't like the motion picture. I thought it was the most boring. Like, you do not need an 11-minute sequence of people flying around looking at the ship. What the actual fuck? And so I absolutely loved that they were making fun of it, and I think they did a really great job of doing so. And then, of course, I like the opening sequence. It also reminded me of Wrath of Khan, and how the credits were like fly at the end, hit them in the head, which I thought was great comedy. I mean, they are on the holodeck; it's not on the movie screen, so I thought that was hilarious. And also how they switched to a widescreen format. I noticed that particularly at the end when Bulmer went back into the holodeck, that is switched immediately to a widescreen, and of course the lens flares, which is definitely making fun of the Abrams reboot era of Star Trek films, that you gotta have those in there. And just how, and not just the lens flares, but how the lighting was a bit moody, because that's true, particularly of Next Generation films. You notice immediately how the lighting is different, to make it more cinematic, and just how they had the opening sequence when they were in like jet skis or whatever, because that's how a movie would start, with them relaxing, say they're on the holodeck on ship on the sea or whatever, or if they're like in climbing a mountain and camping or what have you, they have like an opening scene that shows them sort of relaxing together, and then they get their marching orders. Now, I love how Mariner took on the role of the villain, because the way she was playing it was poking fun at pretty much all the Star Trek villains. Definitely how they, she was like all about revenge and is vindictive, because that's the overall like theme that the Star Trek movies have copied over and over again. Because Wrath of Khan was so successful, they just copy that over and over and over again. They have Soren in Generations be like Khan. They have fucking Shinzon and Nemesis be like Khan. They have Nero in 2009 be like Khan. They have Khan be like Khan in Into Darkness, and they have that other Kroll, what's his face dude in Beyond be like Khan. So it's just repeat the same thing over and over again. And I like how they kind of mocked it all, and they were sort of mocking them. And then of course she was like quoting Shakespeare, just like what's his face General Chang did in Undiscovered Country. And I like how Ransom was like, did she just quote The Tempest? Like, that's hilarious. And it was sort of making it, and how they're over the top evil and got the had things in their eyes like that. To me, that was particularly mocking Nero, because fuck Nero. I will take any opportunity to say the worst villain in cinematic, not Star Trek, but cinematic history. But anyway, sorry, I had to throw that out there. But anyway, I thought it was absolutely hilarious. So, and then you had what other sequences, like when the Cerritos crashed on the planet, very reminiscent of Generations, and they're kind of making fun of it because Generations is more of the salsa just dipped in, but it was like rolling on its side. And of course, how they had to do the Enterprise crashing on a planet several times. It was done in Star Trek 3, it incinerated in the atmosphere, but it was also done again in Star Trek Beyond. So yeah, that's another trope that they play over and over in the movie. And I feel like the funeral at the end was kind of mocking the Spock's funeral, and they also had Data's funeral from Nemesis, and so that was That was kind of funny as well. And just the way that, they had, like, the way they had when Rutherford and the engineer guy were going to run off together, and the doctor was like, oh, you fucking go and do it. Like, it seems like that's reminiscent of, it's just like the perfect way of, like, mocking these films. Now, other observations I had about this episode is the fact that Mariner was going a bit overboard with, like, murdering people, and Tendi was just like, whoa, this is fucked up. This is not okay. And I think that revealed a lot about both their characters, and about particularly Mariner, how she was, like, really has some inner issues, and she was really disturbed. And actually, you know, when she encountered herself and found out the accurate version of herself the holodeck created would sacrifice herself to save the ship and save her own mother. So so that was really powerful. Oh, another reference to the movie I just thought of that I thought was hilarious is how Rutherford said to the engineer guy that's like, oh, I used the tractor beams to simultaneously beam everyone out before the ship crashed. And it's like, and the guy's like, what, you can't, that's not possible. It's like, sure, this is a movie, any transporter thing is possible. Which is a huge jab of stuff like Into Darkness, where they use the transporters to beam, like, to the other side of the galaxy, and just other I think a lot of other Star Trek movies too, where they play a bit fast and loose with how technology works for plot convenience. That was a nice jab as well. I really appreciated that. And then also, of course, the episode ends with the big reveal that, or at least to Bulmer, not to us, the audience, we already knew this, that Ensign Mariner is Captain Freeman's daughter. Actually, and I love the way they use this for comedy. I thought it was hilarious because of course in the holodeck simulation, Freeman's like, oh, I'm glad no one knew this. If anyone ever found this out, I'd probably send them off the ship or court-martial. Bulmer's just like, and how he was like totally freaked out at the interview. Like the whole point was to prepare for this interview for the whole time. He was like, say the first thing that comes to your mind. Mariner! Like, what? What about Mariner? She's hot. No, she's not hot! Just freaks out, and the captain's like, does not prepare at all for the interview. Which I loved. And I love getting back the whole Bulmer thing about when he's in the holodeck. He was like, so what do you think the captain wants to see myself in 5 years? Because that's such a stereotypical interview question. And she does, in fact, ask, so where do you see yourself in 5 years? I fucking love this episode. Anyway, and it does seem like it will have continuity going forward now that this information has come out that Bulmer knows about Freeman. I honestly forgot that this was a secret because they were so open about this in the past. I kind of subconsciously maybe just thought that everyone knew, but I didn't realize that because doesn't Ransom know? I'm pretty sure like she was talking to Ransom about Mariner in that episode when they were promoted her or whatever. Or maybe, I don't know. I'm not sure. Someone's gotta fact check me on that. But and when they were on the planet at the start of the episode, with the cat and lizards thing, that was cool too. I could have sworn like they were openly talking about how you're my daughter, I'm your mother when there's other members of the crew there. So I don't know. Oh yes, and I absolutely have to mention that ending. that was a really play off of the end of Star Trek 2 with the torpedo going on the Genesis planet, and they sort of played it the same way, and they showed the evil Mariner villain Vindictica, whatever she was called, like pop out and go ha ha, and then eventually just shows up and shoots her to go, not on my watch. That was hilarious because it's so weird and out of nowhere, and I think that kind of comedy really works for animated comedies. Plus, I like the whole Da Vinci thing, by the way, which is playing off of how he appeared on Voyager. Like, they drew him pretty much exactly the same as how he appeared on Voyager. They had a hologram version of Da Vinci on Voyager as well. Like, they had him skeet shooting on the holodeck at the start of the episode because that's just kind of random shit they do on the holodeck. But I love how he just pops up out of nowhere and shoots her out of the torpedo. Fucking amazing. I love this episode. Anyway, my rating for Crisis Point out of 10 Is a 10 the best? Yes, I'm giving this a 10. I think this deserves a 10. It was hilarious. It was by far the funniest episode. This is the best character piece episode. It's very well constructed. And I can't think of any flaws. There's nothing that bothered me about this episode. I thought it was perfect comedy. Anyway, that is it for my review of Crisis Point. I shall be back next week to cover the finale of Lower Decks, and of course when Discovery starts, I'll start covering that as well. So be sure check out my channel for that, as well as I cover many other Star Trek videos and also other shows like The Expanse, BoJack Horseman, and The Boys. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.